Welcome and thank you for attending the Pharmacy Board Stakeholder Meeting today via webinar. The date is August 21st, 2023, and the time is 1 p.m. Before we get started, we would like to introduce the staff members from the Division of Professions and Occupations that are present. My name is Darcy Magnuson, and I'm a regulatory analyst with the division. Also attending is Dimitri Kunin, Senior Program Director and Program Director of the Board of Pharmacy, as well as Maria Hernandez, Regulatory Coordinator. As many of you have been to DORA stakeholder meetings before, we would like to reiterate the importance of your comments today. DORA makes decisions every day that may affect your life and your business, so your input is vital in the rulemaking process. Throughout this process, our goal is to create regulations that clarify and explain legislation, ensure minimum competency to enter and continue to practice, and provide only what is absolutely necessary for consumer protection without creating unnecessary barriers to the marketplace. Your input will be part of the information that goes to the board as it considers adopting revisions to the rules. More specifically, today we will be discussing proposed amendments and/or repeals to the following board rules. And I apologize, this is a long list. Rule 5.01.40, outlets, prescription drug outlets in state, minimum hours of operation. The purpose of the proposed amendments to Board Rule 5 are to reflect feedback from stakeholders and board members regarding more updated standards to industry operating hours. Rule 11.06.10, records and record keeping. The purpose of the proposed amendments to Board Rule 11 are to reflect feedback from stakeholders and board members regarding updated standards to industry record keeping. Rule 19.01.10, administration, vaccines and immunizations, qualifications. The purpose of the proposed amendments to this rule, similarly, are to reflect stakeholder feedback and board member feedback to clarify immunization regulations around telepharmacy operations. Rules 1, 5, 11, 14, 21, 26, 27, 29, and 30 regarding or titled professional conduct, outlets, records, and record keeping, other outlets, compounding, remote pharmacy practice, hospital pharmacy, satellite, pharmacy technicians, COVID-19 health response rule. The purpose of these amendments are to, again, reflect feedback from stakeholders and board members and to update COVID-related rule changes throughout the respective rules as Rule 30 is no longer needed. Rule 23.00.70, electronic prescription monitoring program, release of PDMP information. The purpose of the proposed amendments to Board Rule 23 are to reflect feedback from several stakeholders and board members and to clarify records for deceased individuals. Rules 3, 11, 17, 20, and 21, titled Dispensing, Records and Record Keeping, Collaborative Pharmacy Practice, Central Prescription Processing, and Compounding. The proposed amendments are, again, to reflect feedback from stakeholders and board members and to bring the rules up to date with digital technology and other outlet protocols and other record keeping means through digital formats. Rule 2, orders. The proposed changes are to reflect the federal rule update from the DEA, which allows for the transfer of CII prescriptions. Rule 32, protections for provision of reproductive health care in Colorado. The purpose of the proposed repeal of Rule 32 is to implement Senate Bill 23188 concerning protections for accessing reproductive health care, which codified the rule protections in statute, so the rule is no longer necessary. Rule 33, protecting Colorado's workforce and expanding licensing opportunities. The purpose for the proposed repeal of Rule 33 is to implement Senate Bill 23265 concerning a prohibition on a regulator imposing discipline against a person based on certain activities involving marijuana. Again, the rule was codified in statute and therefore the rule is no longer necessary. So all of that I just read was included on the notice for today's meeting. I'm not going to scroll through the rules. Once I finish reading through and do the introductory part of the meeting, I will drop into the chat both the current red line version of the rules and the written comments that we have received so far. We did have a stakeholder meeting this morning, which was regarding the USP rule updates. That webinar recording, will be available on the board's website by close of business tomorrow. Everything regarding rulemaking can be found on the board's website under the public notices tab. So you can check there for the most updated comments, the most current version of the rules, the stakeholder meeting recordings, any webinar links for future meetings, etc. So with that, we will go ahead and move on to the stakeholder feedback. As you heard, this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the board's website by close of business tomorrow. As the stakeholder meeting is held solely by webinar, please raise your hand using the hand icon if you would like to speak, and we will unmute your line so you'll be heard by everyone. Or you can type your comment in the question section, the Q&A section, and we will read it out loud. Before we start taking comments, we ask that anyone providing comments, please state your name and the name of the organization that you represent, if any. Feel free to provide either general comments on the rule changes or specific comments on the proposed language. Keep your comments limited to 3 to 5 minutes or less, and try not to repeat something that was already said. Stating you're in full agreement with someone else works just fine and will be noted. If you are using the audio through your computer, please remember to put any phones on vibrate or turn them off. And whether you are using computer or phone audio, try to keep background noises to a minimum when speaking. It's also helpful for me if you do want to provide feedback, to direct me to the section of the rule that you're referring to, since the pharmacy rules, as you know, are long. Then I can jump there on the screen. And while we wait, we will go over the next steps at the end of the meeting again, but while we wait to see if anyone has any feedback, just so you know, the recordings, written comments, draft rules will all be presented to the pharmacy board during its next meeting in September, where the board will have an open discussion about the proposed changes. Members of the public can listen in to that conversation, but will not be able to address the board at that time. From there, the board will have a permanent rulemaking hearing on October 5th. All of the information, of course, like I said, will be available on the board's website with the webinar links, information, etc. And at the rulemaking hearing, members of the public will be given a final opportunity to testify before the board begins its deliberations and decides whether to adopt the proposed changes. With that said, we do encourage you to provide any comments in advance of the rulemaking hearing for a couple of reasons. One being that we want other stakeholders to be aware of the comments and be able to provide any additional feedback regarding the comments. And two, we like to give the information to the board members in advance of the board meeting so that they have some time to think about it and be prepared for the rulemaking hearing. And I will go ahead and drop into the chat the rulemaking email address if anyone wants to submit written comments. You can also find that email address on all of the notices that we send out for these meetings. So, but I will drop it into the chat as well. Andrea Nolte, you are unmuted. Andrea Nolte.
Hi, my name is Andrea Nolte. I'm with Stack Pharma. We are an outsourcing facility in Denver, and I had a question about the proposed rules for Section 21. You mentioned non-resident outsourcing facilities, but you have not really mentioned anything about in-state outsourcing facilities, and there are two in Colorado, one of which is us, Stack Pharma, and then we also have Lighters out in Inglewood. So I was just wondering if any of these new compounding rules were going to pertain to our business and what your proposed plans were if they are not going to, if these new rules aren't going to pertain to us.
Hey, Andrea, this is Dimitri Gooden, Program Director for the Board of Pharmacy. I think it's a valid question. Just a reminder that in stakeholder meetings, we don't often answer questions, but they are feedback just as much as comments are. So we can take that question back to the board in general for Rule 21. If you want us to make a comment to the side, unless there's a specific rule within Rule 21, the Rule 21 is pretty long and complex and is carrying through a lot of changes at this time. If there's more of a specific one you'd like to attach that comment to, we can do that as well. Or if you'd like to take some time, read through it, and send that feedback, like Darcy was saying, through the email box, that can be done as well.
Okay, kind of like the same way that written comment is portrayed in there, that Walgreens did a sort of comment, sort of email towards you guys. Is that the format you would like that in?
Sure, yeah, that's absolutely fine.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else? We'll go ahead and wait a couple of more minutes till 1:15. If we don't have any raised hands or comments to the Q&A, then we will move on. Maimuna Bryce, you are unmuted. Maimuna Bryce.
Yes, hello, Maimuna Bruce with Outcomes. I just had a general question if you're able to answer. I'm just wondering if we are able to comment on sections of rules that haven't been redlined or addressed.
So normally stakeholder meetings are really receiving feedback for things that the board has initiated the rulemaking process on. That's, I can clarify that part of the process. So if there are considerations or recommendations for current rules to be edited for whatever reason, usually those stem either from changes in industry that require clarification or edits in our rules, or legislative mandate where the legislature has created law that requires us to clarify board rule, either new or existing. The board has to first receive and consider the need or necessity for rulemaking, at which point they make a decision on they either believe rulemaking needs to happen or it doesn't. If it doesn't, it stops there with initial board review. If it does, they initiate the rulemaking process, which includes a number of milestones and steps, one of which is receiving feedback like this. So if you do have anything you want to run by the board or by me to get in front of the board, we'll take a look at it. Feel free to send an email. That most likely at this point won't be routed towards the board. until most likely their January meeting, because then anything that's non-urgent for rulemaking perspective or timeline just goes into their once a year hearing, which is in the fall. So at this point, it would be too late to get onto their yearly hearing schedule for rulemaking for 2023, which is in early October, but it's something you can definitely contemplate and send over, and we can take a look and potentially get that in front of the board in early of 2024.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anyone else? Anything else from you, Dimitri, before we wrap up?
No, I'm good. Thank you, Darcy.
Okay, thank you for participating and being here for today's meeting. Like we said earlier, the stakeholder comments and program recommendations will be presented to the board in September. And then again at the permanent rulemaking hearing, which is scheduled for October 5th, 2023. Like I said, all information can be found on the board's website under the public notices tab. Check there, because when we receive the written comments, and I anticipate based on some comments today, we will be receiving more of those. We acknowledge receipt in the email inbox, and then we post those online as soon as we do that. So check back, and the same with the draft rules. Like you can see in these, we will add the comments where applicable into the side comments of the draft rules, so it's easier for stakeholders to see and for board members to follow. That does conclude our stakeholder meeting, and we thank you again for your attendance and participation.